So we are back with Ron Hughes, and when we left off, we started talking about the impacts of the increased rapidity of technological change and what it's meaning for the teaching profession. And I know one of the things is the mantra in K-12 education has been professional development, professional development. But and again, I also mentioned this with the interview with David Haynes down in Oxnard, the last couple of years I've come to the conclusion that our structure of professional development is not going to keep up with the rapidity of change, and we need to incentivize getting the people who are professionals in those areas day to day to become part of the K-12 by providing augmented instruction and by helping the coach system teachers with the idea that trying to get enough people in those professions to commit to a school of 10 to 15 hours a month to provide that support.
Yeah. Well, again, that you're posing an interesting problem, and it's one of those problems that there are probably multiple pathways
Right.
to solve it. But when you talk about professional development, I've watched it over the last 35 years, and where it used to be fairly prescriptive, it used to be professional development
Right.
was only done by universities.
Right.
Then we moved to an era where about 15 years ago, many of the school districts took on the professional
Right.
development. And as you probably saw, we also saw the decline in professional organizations,
Right.
where people normally would go in California to California science teachers or to a national science
Right.
teachers conference, etc. And it was not, I'll give you some statistics. I used to be on the board for the California Science Teachers
Right.
Association, a
Right,
4-year.
and that's sort of
yeah,
the period of time when we
Yep.
met.
And so, what happened is it was a very powerful group. The advantage is that individuals could come not only from throughout California, but we had people that would come in from Nevada, Arizona. People would come in to attend these. We had one conference that had 12,000 people up in the San Jose area. Today, in contrast, we probably have fewer than 3,000 people attend any of the California Science Teachers
Right.
meetings. And because school districts took on that role,
Right.
it was done for a variety of reasons.
Right.
Part of it was economic. Part of it was because we saw the elimination of Eisenhower funds, if you
Right.
remember those. There
Right.
was federal dollars that
Right.
promoted the professional development
Right.
of math and science teachers. Under President Bush, that stuff got folded in to block grants
Right.
and was almost entirely
Right.
devoted towards second language acquisition and just the language arts programs. And we saw for about a decade the demise of science
Right.
in the state of California. We couldn't get our state frameworks approved.
Right.
We couldn't, and therefore we could not get the science material suppliers on board.
Right.
It was a domino effect in terms of what was happening. So, what happens now? The issue of getting people to do, qualified to be able to do the right jobs in technology still becomes complex. I was
Right.
mentioning during the break, I was mentioning to you that, it's still true, as it was 10, 15 years ago, that if we could convince every science major in every university
Right.
across the United States to become a teacher, on this
Right.
stuff, we still could not fill all the positions with credentialed teachers in the fields that we need. So it becomes, I find it very interesting that we would set up more challenges to be able to get the
Right.
appropriate people into the
Right.
classroom to be able to guide us through at least the technological fields,
Right.
online courses, digital,
Right.
using digital materials
Right.
and resources, et cetera, to teach. So
Right.
it's, I think it's an interesting challenge.
Right. And I think, again, going back to that, the increased rapidity of technological change, I think part of the culture and the teaching profession is for students looking to go into teaching.
Yeah.
I feel they have to go in the mindset that it is a constant change. Right now, we've got
Yeah.
too much of a culture of having a stagnation, and many times I see a very large percentage of teachers sort of plateau and become stagnant after
Yeah.
5 years and
Yeah.
stay where they're at for 10 to 15
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah. Well, there's again, this is anecdotal. What I saw, I mentioned a few minutes ago that school districts took on the professional
Right.
development. And I want to tell you that when I entered teaching in the early 1980s,
Right.
1980, 81, on this, there was a real excitement to be able to go to a major
Right,
conference
right.
and to interact with individuals. And what I have seen is a change in attitude, because many people that go in the teaching profession now, because of at least the perceived longer hours, more difficult work environment,
Right.
we've done more mainstreaming of students,
Right.
we have more cultural diversity, class sizes have gotten larger, et cetera. So that what happens is teachers of, many of the teachers that I have trained and worked with out in the field have kind of adapted an attitude that, well, I show up at 7 in the morning and I go home at 3 in the afternoon
Right.
and I'm done.
Right.
Not very many of them will give up their time as I did, and many
Right.
others, where you gave up weekends for some of your students, you got them involved in competitions.
Right.
As I know you do, Mark, you take
Right.
kids out and do
Right.
field-based work, and that's where a tremendous amount of learning takes place.
Right.
So, what happens, I just want to talk about that transition, is that I believe that we have fewer teachers, for example, that are really committed
Right.
to work beyond that minimum of hours
Right.
that's required by a contract
Right.
on this
Right.
thing. So,
Right.
that's
Right.
part of the issue.
Right, besides seeing that, but a lot, when it comes to that change, and
Yeah.
when you talked about the change in the professional development
Yep.
of the districts
Yep.
and such,
Yep.
one of the common complaints that
Yeah.
I hear from teachers across the state
Yep.
dealing with when they do a professional development is that it's a one shot, and
Yeah.
if they come up with something, is there's not the follow-up or the continue support that's
Yeah.
needed. So as one,
Yeah.
to paraphrase one teacher, is if I try it in the classroom and I start getting glitches with my Google books,
Yeah.
I'm not going to use that
Yeah.
thing again.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah. We've, again, this is something that we've known for 30 years or better.
Right.
There was a study done by Dr. Larry Enix out of the Midwest that was embraced by everybody in science ed
Right.
across the United States, that we know that one-shot workshops
Right.
don't work.
Right.
On this stuff, to come in to work with a group of teachers even 2 or 3 days, unless you have follow-up,
Right.
systematic follow-up over the academic year, the odds of that experience translating into a change in teaching,
Right.
a change in student learning, is minimal,
Right.
if not non-existent. And
Right.
so what happens is, by 1980, 1985, we had largely moved away from those one-shot experiences,
Right.
and the research holds
Right.
that to be true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I think, again, with a lot of the school districts, as far as that transformance
Yeah.
is, I look at it as we've built up a cottage industry of certain
Yeah.
individuals that are connected with certain superintendents.
Yep.
And basically having pockets lined
Yep.
rather than succeeding on getting change and getting what's
Yeah.
needed to be done.
Yeah, I don't know that I characterize it that radical, but the reality is it's still, it's a budgetary thing.
Right.
And I just remember encountering a school board member that did not understand why teachers needed to get together to share ideas, on a statewide or a national basis, such as the California Science Teachers
Right.
and National Science Teachers. And his whole thought was that, well, couldn't teachers do something on their own and just share it with the other teachers in the district? In fact, we had if you recall, over the last 10 years, 15 years, we had what were called professional learning communities.
Right.
And that was about somebody having something, a successful strategy, a successful lesson, and to share it with the other teachers in their school district and go from there. But, but what happens is innovation doesn't come, from within just a family. It's really hard to get that. And
Right.
the idea is that oftentimes we need to go outside our regions.
Right.
We need to try some novel approaches, innovative approaches, to be able to really create a culture of change to make things happen. And, I believe in that sincerely.
Okay, Ron, I thank you very much for the
Okay.
time and a good discussion, and glad to have you as our guest.
All right, Mark, pleasure working with you.
Okay.
Okay.